and welcome to the New World Review. I'm Grand Line Waifu, and there is a lot to discuss as we storm the palace. Open the gates! Let's get into episode 112 of Hunter x Hunter. 112, 11-2, 11-2, numbers. There were a lot of styles used in episode 112 as the humans storm the ant nest, as it were. And the title of the episode was quite indicative of how the narrator is telling the story as well as how we're supposed to read the situation. Straight through the arc, we've been thrown back and forth between who are the protagonists and who are the antagonists, and all I know after watching that episode is that I still actually don't know who is an antagonist and who's a protagonist. It's a fascinating position to be in and absolutely is encouraged by the narrator describing both sides of the combat as though he's on their side. When talking about Pito falling, it's deemed to be a good thing because Pito can see what's happening in the palace and react accordingly in a way that's good for the ants. Meanwhile, Shoot's revelation of a broken cage is good because we're shown how much of a role model Gon was for him. That almost duplicity of narration means that we're almost squarely in the middle, and we can understand why Netero just stands there watching while Mary deals with Komugi, which is really what this whole episode was building toward, right? I mean, the whole Komugi arc, really. All the pointing out of how weak and useless she is, all the noting of how much of a waste of time and energy, and yet he's still fallen in love with her and needs her healed. And now we know, of course, what's going to happen, right? Unless Pito's actively trying to bring her back to exactly what she was at before, Komugi will no longer be blind or sniffly or any number of things, right? We don't know what it'll do to her mind, but she's not going to have the barriers she had before. She'll be at full strength for a kid. She might have Nen if her health were a limiting factor before. She'll actually get to see the king, and that's exciting. If we get to there. At the moment, we're moving almost second by second. And part of what I'm loving about this sequence is that expansion and contraction of time. We've got our little monster, Gon, who is only looking for one thing, Pito. And once he gets to them, what's he going to do? Because if he gets to them before Pito's finished healing, then what? Will he have as much honor as Netero? I mean, we have Hunter x Hunter as the title of the show and Monster Monster as the episode title. Who is the monster? Who is the hunter? And who is human? Killua, knowing his grandfather is in the building, may or may not come into play too, I guess. It sort of suggests that they'll see each other at some point, or that one or the other will be able to take news of what happens back to their families, but I'm really not sure. Overall, in terms of sound design, the episode felt like it started very broad and chipped away until we were in total silence with Mary and Komugi. The fact that Pito was warned by the aura of the king as they got closer says a whole lot about how undefined that concern is. That it was the same energy being given out to everyone indiscriminately shows that the king wasn't even angry so much as grieving. And for everyone in that room to note the tenderness and humanity with which he held her, the moment the art softened around Pito and became romantic, we get a glimpse into exactly who Komugi is to Mary. Pito doesn't get confused or worried or afraid or concerned. Pito gets to work. Because it's likely the queen they failed to protect, and now they must do their best work to bring them back, potentially sacrificing the king to do so. More specifically, doing as the king says, not as their instincts say. The tears that come feel like a response to all of that. The fear of knowing they can no longer help the king physically and knowing that the other two may not find him in time to lay themselves down in service of him. The personal failure involved in needing to heal. If they'd done their job in the first place, they wouldn't have needed to, right? So much is communicated just in the few frames of conversation and tears, and the narration that his face, the king's face, returned to normal. If someone's face is back to normal in the face of such intense emotion, in spite of such intense emotion, we know that's a bad thing, right? Like, we all know that. As it is, anytime he's had a human emotion, we haven't seen it. It's been hidden every time. If we can't see his face, it's almost like a Greek chorus. In ancient Greek theatre, they never performed the most intense scenes. Instead, they described them for the audience, because anything you can imagine will be more intense than what can be shown. That's sort of what's happening here, and it totally works. We put emotion on that blanked out black and white frame. In silence, we see that grief play out, and the highlighting of that one streak of blood before we get further in, it's all crucial. Working backwards in the episode, everyone but Gon had a freeze moment. Despite the minutiae of what's happening in combat, what I loved about this episode is that we saw each and every character freeze for a reason, or need to take a moment to re-engage with their purpose. The fact that so many freezes were detailed was a source of real joy as a psychologist, because it showed how everyone's trauma and emotions were activated differently. Netero, who treats human-like behaviors humanely while Killwa's grandfather looks on passively and confused, even as the king just walks past them. Shoot, whose cage ability so clearly is used to capture others and make them small, is obviously a metaphor for the cage he felt he was in, a cage that is now open. We had Killwa, all-knowing Killwa who expects everything but knows how to deal with nothing until others act. Yuppie, who can only act and nothing more because he's made of, checks notes, magical beasts. Knuckle, who has no idea how long it'll take for his power to pull Yuppie down. And Gon, the greatest monster who thinks of nothing but his goal. More than Yuppie, I would say he is the true monster. Yuppie has no self-preservation, nor does Gon. But not being human, we might assume that Yuppie also has no capacity for empathy. As a human, Gon has capacity, but he's a sociopath. So can it be engaged, and if it can, will he allow it to be? We come back again to that question early on in the series that I keep coming back to, and I'm so sorry, but I'm also not at all sorry. If you have to choose between who lives and who dies, who do you choose? Is Komugi a possible casualty of that decision-making process that's been going on for, I don't know, at least a year for me? Let's take a look at episode 113 and find out. 113 and the eloquence of Morel's yo. Notwithstanding, this episode was hugely emotional for everyone involved, and I'm beginning to wonder whether the fact that they're all running on emotion is going to be a help or a hindrance. In the case of Gon, who almost shuts down due to his emotion and looks like the creepiest kid on the planet while watching a couple of grown-ups walk off with a giant bug, I don't really know what's going to happen next, and I like that. I really like that. I have the sense that he and Perf will be of accord though. If Perf makes it to Pito, I suspect that Perf will try to kill Komugi himself, despite his claims that he's a traitor and sick of the king's care for a lowly human. Shire's going through a lot, and it seems the most important thing for him is that he go through it in the most melodramatic way possible. Actively deciding to go where the king was not because he couldn't bear to see the king with someone he's decided to spend time with sounds like pure jealousy. And not only pure jealousy, but some extreme supremacism on his part, given he also has human DNA to him, which he seems to have forgotten. It's interesting to look at things in that context since I'm who I am, I guess, in so many ways, but the idea that Violin Butterfree could abandon the king because the king isn't living up to his fanatical ideals shows us just how quickly fanatical ideals can get out of hand. I wonder whether he even knew what those ideals were before Komugi came along, and what he would deem to be appropriate ideals given the life cycle of a chimera ant should also be hardwired, and eventually the king would have had to take a queen to continue the breeding line, no? What would he have accepted? Would anything have been acceptable? A number of ants have defected at this point for a variety of reasons, and I find it fascinating that this has occurred so close to the king, and how the guard have all reacted differently. Pito sees what the king wants, and does it because that to them is loyalty. Yuppie lays down his life immediately to make sure no one can get to the king because that to him is loyalty. Shia LaPerf does not go to the king deliberately because that is loyalty. It's just about what he's being loyal to, right? Allowing the king to go unprotected shows that he's happy for the king to be killed for his choices, essentially. And the fact that he was still there even after all that happened and wasn't rushing? And returning to Netero and Gon for a moment, Netero was telling Gon where Pito was, but nothing more. Does Netero know how much of a monster Gon is? With the shadowy behavior there, surely. Is humanity only for people like Netero, or would he be disappointed in Gon's behavior if Gon kills Pito before Komugi's healed? And how much does it take to heal a technically unremarkable human? Shoot has reached his final form. He's going to rescue everyone on his handcopter. Something I love about Shoot is that he's sort of fueled by his cowardice, so making things worse for himself raises that cowardice index, which makes it sound like I have a full coward scale, and now I've decided I must. Excuse me while I get on that. Number 1, are you such a coward that a small boy is your inspiration? Check. 2, are you such a coward that not being able to see your opponent makes you cooler? Check. Are you flying on your own flying hand? Check. Conclusion. You may be Shoot scared, but you get the job done. Well done. Speaking of getting the job done, Killwa done gone and beeped things up for everyone, hey? But all in the name of friendship. It's kind of hard to tell whether Killwa goes in to protect Icalgo and doesn't know why because he's never really needed to with Gon other than to take him out of a fight, or if he goes in to protect Octobuddy because he actually cares about him in a way that's genuinely wholesome. Gon has never, to my recollection, actually thanked Killwa for what he does. He just takes it as given that Killwa will do what's needed and asks Killwa to do stuff for him. Or says, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be, unable to help you in this situation because I'm gone and selfish. Icalgo might be the first time Killwa's experienced genuine gratitude from someone, and that's remarkable. To a great degree, Icalgo is the friend Killua should have had. Gon is what he got. With Icalgo, Killua feels like a part of his life. He feels intrinsically connected to Octobuddy's survival. With Gon, he spends so much time observing that it's hard to tell if they're friends or if Gon just likes having a hype crew around. The nature of friendship in general became a huge point of this episode really, with Shoot helping Morel, who helped Knuckle, and after Pito did what the king asked while Shia LaPerf left him to fend for himself, and how Netero knows Gon has a score to settle with Pito, so helps on that account. There's a lot of different relationships all on display here, and the vast number of art media used to show movement or softness or clarity. With Killua, we went from the harsh outline sketch of a new creation to the romantic soft charcoals of a character going to help his friend in Killua sequences. And I know I'm jumping around, but the episode had me mentally doing that too. We're seeing, moment by moment, how these characters are reacting to their situations. And Gon didn't even notice Killua wasn't there, because why would he? Sociopath has a task to do, and if Killua's dead, we can deal with that later, right? Killua's confused because it wasn't the plan, and then Killua's confused because his emotions got in the way of the task. Killua's white light art, in essence, has proven that Killua is human. The humanity is there. Meanwhile, Gon is dark and empty, and we know that there is nothing there but a monster, for now, at least. And you know what? On that sober note, that's it from me. If you enjoyed this mentally bouncing review, click here, here, maybe here. Make sure you're getting enough food and water and sleep and have a burger and all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.